I'm with you on. I don't think the speed of light is a constant, and it's to do with the space that the light travels through, in my opinion. That you've got. I'm not sure whether it's the permeability or permittivity of space itself will determine the speed of light, but that's probably another subject as well. But because I actually agree with you that 8-year-olds should not be being taught evolution as fact, but probably for a different reason. So I'm just going to throw this into the pot, Tony, because you said in your letter to Michael Gove, the Education Secretary, that there are really only two rival explanations for the origin of life, which is evolution versus creationism. So I'm going to throw in a third one.
Oh, go on then,
so this is has been written about extensively by researcher Lloyd Pye, who died very recently, and he called that theory intervention theory. So I'll just read what I've written here. His theory contends that throughout the evolution of both the Earth and of species, there has been intervention by what he calls terraformers. He doesn't use the word God. He suggests that man was made by a God with a small g, i.e. advanced beings who once inhabited the Earth, and this comes from the work of Zecharia Sitchin, who at least in part used genetic engineering to create the human species around about 200,000 years ago. He points to anomalies in the human gene pool, such as the second chromosome being 2 chromosomes fused together, and other evidence such as the functioning of the human brain, and the fact that he claims that there are too many genetic defects in the human gene pool, which suggests that you wouldn't get that many gene defects in such a young 200,000-year-old gene pool. It suggests that it's been cut and spliced and messed with. All right, so he points to evidence of genetic engineering, and then he goes on with his intervention theory to say that there are several key interventions that have taken place to create the conditions on Earth for life, so which we can possibly discuss.
Does he in fact postulate in one form or another a creator or designer then?
He just calls them terraformers.
Or a force or something.
Yeah, some sort of intelligent guiding finger, if you like. But I think he would contend that the theory of directed panspermia, which is the seeding, that the Earth was seeded in various stages with the early single-cell bacteria, or single-cell life
from another source somewhere else.
From somewhere else in the galaxy or the universe.
And the evidence for that is?
Well, the fact that two different types appear simultaneously, neither of which could have evolved from each other. And then you've got from single-cell life, multiple-cell life, with no actual explanation as to how one can evolve into the other. In fact, just the appearance of single-cell life in itself. I think there's a quote from Fred Hoyle with the analogy in a junkyard where a single-cell life form, which is the simplest form of life that can exist, is far more complex than a jumbo jet. So for that to occur randomly, it's a bit like throwing a hand grenade into a junkyard and a jumbo jet by accident assembling itself.
Well, you're making my arguments for me then. I'm very grateful to you. I mean, you've actually elucidated one of the key arguments for a creator or a designer, which is that, as you absolutely correctly say, the cell is a hugely complicated, a tiny cell, a hugely complicated mechanism, and you probably know more about it than I do. But I mean, it functions in a I would say a miraculous way, in that in one cell you've got this complex mechanism, and from that one cell can develop you and I with all the features that we have and what have you. It replicates itself, the DNA, and from one cell, 2 cells, 4 cells, and we become in the womb a fetus and a baby after 9 months and develop into what we are. All the features to produce us are in that one cell, and of course the cell is different for each creation, plant or animal. But can I sort of look at this another way by taking a specific example from the fossil record, which is what this letter is all about. This letter is people should be taught to recognise that living things have changed over time, and fossils provide information about living things that inhabited the Earth millions of years ago. Yes, fossils provide information about living things. So they're getting at 8-year-olds through fossils. I'm very happy to discuss fossils, right? That's very important evidence. Let's look at one particular fossil, the trilobite. The trilobite was a creature usually measuring about 1 to 3 inches. And it's found in the very lowest layers of the geological column, the sedimentary rocks, called the Cambrian. Or they're also found in slightly higher layers, the Silurian and the Ordovician and so on, but the very lowest layers. Now, in the rocks, in the lowest rocks that we've got, the lowest sedimentary rocks, you've got literally millions of trilobite fossils. I've got a couple in my drawer there, produce them, but there are millions of them. Yeah. Now, the trilobite has been analysed, and what I'm going to say is recognised science. It consists of 3 separate lobes, hence trilobite, 3 lobes. It's a 3-lobed creature. It's got what I would say is a unique shell made of an extremely strong material. It's a bit like Kevlar carbon, only about 1,000 times as strong.
Right.
That creature survived under thousands of feet of ocean pressure, so able to withstand huge water pressure and still remain intact as a shell. In addition to that, it crawls on up to 40 pairs of legs, a bit like a millipede. It's got tiny little feet with hairs on them.
Yep.
Perhaps most miraculous of all, it has a complex series of interlocking hexagonal lenses. So if you look at the structure of the eye, because the fossils are so well preserved that we can see how it is structured, several dozen or perhaps 100 or more interlocking hexagonal lenses which interlock to enable the trilobite to see, and also to see in total darkness. So the trilobite had vision through these lenses. Now, the point I'm coming to is this: why is that fossil found in the lowest layers of our rocks? The very lowest layers of sedimentary rocks. The first ones to be laid down. Now, the evolutionists say these trilobites existed 600 million years ago. What came before the trilobite? So you've got these amazingly complex creatures. Can you imagine the amount of DNA needed to produce that shell, the 3 lobes, the hexagonal eyes, and so on? What came before that? Where do we find in the fossil record, which Michael Gove is saying shows transition over time? What creatures do we find in the fossil record before the trilobite? What led up to the trilobite? Nothing, Richard. There's nothing there. There's nothing. There's no. This trilobite is just there in the fossil record, fully formed, an intricately designed creature. Where are the antecedents? Where is the origin of this? It's nowhere. There's no evidence for it. These straight parallel lines of rocks, which you see most typically in the Grand Canyon. The same rock going on, parallel strips for miles and miles and miles, one after the other. They can only be produced rapidly. They can't be produced over a period of time. And also, incidentally, within these rocks, you often find what are called polystrate fossils, and that is things like fossil tree trunks, perhaps 70 feet high fossil tree trunks that straddle all these strata. So how can it be, for example, that a tree trunk 70 feet can be entombed over something that's gradually built over millions of years? It can't be. It can't be. So that's another proof that these strata were laid down rapidly. Now, the entire record of the rocks from the Cambrian upwards can, we believe, be explained by the 1-year flood of Noah. So we say that the evidence in the rocks and the fossils points to this extraordinary cataclysmic event, the 1-year flood which covered the whole earth, and that accounts for what we see in the rocks and the way they're laid out and how they're made up.
All right, well, I mean, we'll part company on the time scale of it then, but I guess I'm with you to a degree. I mean, I think that the Genesis was loosely describing real events, but was loosely describing a God with a small g. Not, I don't think God of the whole universe. I don't know who or what that is, but as it says, they made man in God's image. So therefore, I think that may be true, that there was either Anunnaki, as described by Sitchin, or some other, what's the word that they would use in Egypt, a demigod, that had some sort of superiority over man, and they were trying to create a race to help them, or slave race, some people will call it. And people such as Jordan Maxwell have tried to interpret the Hebrew Bible and come up with slightly different interpretations. In other words, he says that the God, the Elohim, was a congregation of gods, and the God of the Bible was one being from that. That there are other gods, and that the Garden of Eden was some sort of scientific area set up by these beings to genetically engineer Adam and Eve. And it's my belief, and it is just a belief, that this is the Bible's trying to tell you that in a more simplified version, so people can understand it.
Let me explain why we regard the Bible as a source document, and a reliable one. First of all, when it deals with verifiable historical facts, things that you can actually verify, it's got an unparalleled 100% record. You look at some of the accounts of the Israelites' campaigns and fights against the Egyptians and the Assyrians and the Babylonians, that sort of thing. All these accounts have stood up. The archaeological confirmation is 100%. There's nothing in the Old Testament that's ever been disproved. Now, there are certain things that can't be proved either way, if you like. And the creation account is one of those. We can't verify that objectively from historical data, but